If you watch this all the way through, you'll discover why a tiny group of people can speak two completely different languages of reality. And why that skill might be the most valuable thing nobody's talking about in 2026. While billions of humans are either entirely pre-internet or entirely post-internet, there's a narrow slice who experienced both worlds during the exact years when their brains were still becoming who they are. And according to neuroscience, that's not confusion. Your nervous system might have built something most people will never possess. Stay with me, because what I am about to show you will rewrite everything you thought you knew about why some people handle change like it's nothing. Right now, in February 2026, artificial intelligence is reshaping jobs faster than anyone predicted. Self-driving cars are rolling out in major US cities. People are losing careers they spent decades building. And while most generations are either terrified or completely naive, there's one group watching with a very specific kind of calm. If you were born between 1977 and 1983, you've seen this movie before. Not the details, but the structure. You grew up where you walked to your friend's house and knocked, hoping they'd be home, where missing your show meant it was gone forever, where boredom was just something you sat with. Then around your early 20s, everything changed overnight. Cell phones, social media, GPS. The entire infrastructure of how humans connect got rebuilt while you were still figuring out who you were. That timing created something researchers are calling technological bilingualism. Here's what's actually happening in your brain. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for adapting to new environments, stays highly plastic until roughly age 25. Research from Yale found this region continues forming critical pathways well into your mid-20s. That means your brain was still soft when the world went digital. You weren't just observing the transition. You were neurologically absorbing both the analog and digital paradigms as part of your core identity. Most people's brains solidify around one reality. Yours had to integrate two completely contradictory ones. Think about that. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. This created something psychologists haven't seen before. What I am calling adaptation immunity. It's not just that you can navigate both systems. It's that massive change doesn't trigger the same threat response in your nervous system. Older Gen Xers were already adults when the internet arrived. They learned technology as a foreign language. That's why many still feel suspicious of it. Younger millennials have zero memory of life before smartphones. For them, constant connectivity is just baseline reality. But you remember the before, you lived through the during. You exist comfortably in the after. Your brain holds all three states simultaneously, and this shows up in ways you don't even notice. Like your relationship with documentation, you grew up where your mistakes just evaporated, that embarrassing haircut, that messy breakup, that drunk night at a party. There's no permanent record, it lives only in human memory. Which means it can fade, transform, become mythology instead of evidence. Research from the University of Chicago found that our brains are designed to edit the past. We retain what serves us. We let the rest blur. That's not memory failure. That's how resilience gets built, but when everything is archived forever. That natural healing process gets disrupted. You're one of the last groups who got to form an identity without a digital witness. Your past self isn't frozen in a tagged photo. It's allowed to evolve. Here's something that sounds contradictory but explains everything. People in this micro-generation often feel like they don't belong anywhere. Too young for Gen X, too old for millennials. And that's not confusion. That's your brain recognizing it was shaped by inputs neither group experienced. You have Gen X independence because you grew up before helicopter parenting. Your parents didn't know where you were for hours. You rode your bike across town. You learned to navigate boredom without adult intervention. But you also came of age during the early internet, back when everyone believed technology would connect humanity. Before we realized it might be fracturing us, you hold both realities, skepticism and optimism, analog patience and digital speed. What researchers call micro-generation psychology isn't about being special. It's about living through a specific rupture at a specific brain development stage. And let us be honest about something nobody wants to say. A lot of you got economically destroyed right when you were building stability. You entered the workforce around 2008. Straight into one of the worst financial collapses in American history. Maybe you got laid off 6 months into your first job. Maybe you watched friends just slightly older lock in careers and housing while you scrambled. A Stanford study found that financial instability during your 20s rewires how your brain processes risk and trust. Even decades later, that underlying what if it all collapses again current never disappears. So you learned to navigate technological upheaval, which built adaptability. But you also learned that systems you trusted can implode without warning. Your ability to handle change isn't just a skill. It's a trauma response that happened to be useful. Here's the part that explains why people slightly older or younger can fully understand you. Gen Xers find meaning through self-reliance. They came of age during the Cold War. Their psychology is rooted in radical independence. Millennials find meaning through collaboration. They grew up being told they were special. Their psychology is rooted in optimistic interdependence. But you've got both, the self-reliance of Gen X, the collaborative instincts of millennials. You ray independent but not isolated. Connected but not dependent, skeptical but not cynical. They ray not wrong, neither are you, just two different maps for the same human need. What neuroscientists call selective engagement versus constant connectivity becomes visible here. Younger generations maintain what researchers call ambient intimacy. They feel connected through likes and comments. It's legitimate relationship maintenance, but you operate differently. You ray fluent online. But you also remember 3-hour phone conversations. You value depth over frequency. You vanish from social media for weeks without guilt. Neither approach is superior, just different strategies. Let us talk about a culture that worships constant relevance. American society rewards visibility, hustle. Personal branding. If you ray not posting, not networking, not building your platform, the message says you ray obsolete. But you remember when your value wasn't tied to your output, when you could simply exist without documenting it. What if substance over visibility is just as legitimate? What if presence over productivity is more sustainable? American work culture doesn't validate that. Performance reviews, networking events, the pressure to always be on. These systems were designed for people who thrive on external validation, but choosing depth isn't avoidance. It's recognition that you were built during a different paradigm, but here's the line you need to see clearly. There's a massive difference between choosing selective engagement, because that's where you find meaning, and using it to hide from vulnerability. If you ray building depth because you've figured out what matters. That's wisdom. If you ray disappearing from every opportunity because nothing feels worth the disappointment. That's worth examining. One is a preference, the other is a defense mechanism in disguise. Your ability to navigate both worlds is genuine strength, but if you ray using it as permission to never commit, never risk being wrong, then maybe the issue isn't external change. Maybe you've stopped believing anything is worth fighting for. The next time someone tries to force you into a category that doesn't fit, remember this: you ray not confused. You ray not too old to understand new systems. You ray not too young to value what existed before. You ray just playing an entirely different game, one where adaptability doesn't mean abandoning your core. One where holding contradictions is evidence you survived a transition most people will never comprehend. And if that feels isolating sometimes, it's because most people haven't realized there are other ways to build meaning besides what the algorithm is selling. If this hit home, you need to understand why some people can walk away from their entire social network and feel liberation instead of loss. The psychology of people who prefer solitude is where things get even more uncomfortable. Click to find out. Psychology Unpacked. See you in the next Unpack.